We are already in the third decade of the 21st century, and times are changing at an unprecedented rate. Exciting as this pace for all the opportunities available that are at our fingertips, it's also a bit scary because of the exact same reason. For my generation, the sheer number of possibilities outweigh the dreams and aspirations that we harbor. For instance, many of my peers may be good at academics, but are still unsure of what they want to study in university. Many others may be good at sports or art or have a skill that is unique to them, but are not exactly aware of how to use this talent to their advantage in the future. And this is exactly why I'm glad that we have a webinar series by GIIS, which allows you to get advice from the one person everyone trusts most when in doubt, the parent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Parent Ambassador webinar series, the one place where students like us will be guided by parents like you to make the right career choices at the right time. I am Diksha Kapoor, an International Baccalaureate Diploma Program Year 1 student at GIIS Smart Campus, Singapore, and I today have the honor of hosting the first ever webinar in this series. This is a place where we will talk to parents who want to share with us their life stories, their lessons, their experiences, and their observations, so that us students can learn and benefit from these chats. In the first episode, we have the privilege of speaking to one of the most prolific parents who has taken time from his busy schedule to help us, to guide us. Please allow me to welcome Mr. Venkat Chandramoleshwar, Global Partnerships at Google. Welcome to the webinar, Mr. Venkat.
Thank you very much. I have prepared a talk and a small presentation that I'll start off with, and I want to make sure that at the end of it, I keep enough time to take your questions. Thank you, GISA, for arranging this series. I think it is extremely important for students to learn, not only in the present, but also about preparing for the future. And I'm very happy to be invited to give a talk and share some of my experiences
Thank you,
with the students here.
Thank you, Mr. Venkat. Mr. Venkat has had a very prolific career after a very long educational journey during which he studied engineering and finance. And today he is part of the Google family, a workplace many of us are aspiring to be in, I'm sure. We also have with us our GIS career counselor, Ms. Seema Kaushik, as a panelist at this webinar. Ms. Kaushik has experience in career counseling of students and has helped many students write their applications for universities of their choice. Before we begin, I would request the audience to post all of their questions in the question and answer section of the Zoom webinar. We will try to answer as many questions as possible on air. Now, let me hand over the time and the mic to Mr. Venkat, who will take us through a small presentation. Later, we will have a discussion and throw open the session for question and answers with the audience. Over to you, Mr. Venkat.
Thank you very much. I am sharing my presentation on screen, and we'll get started. It seems not too long ago, but it is a fair amount of time since I was in your shoes thinking about, what do I want to be doing when I grow up, when I finish college. But just as on the lighter side, when I was maybe in the 5th grade or so, my aspiration was to become a conductor who works on a bus, and that's very common in India. That was my aspiration. When I was finishing up 12th grade, I had a little more defined plans. My plan was to actually work in the automotive industry, the car manufacturing industry. And fast forward to today, through a bunch of journeys, I've landed up here working with a company, Google, that most of you will know about, and doing some really interesting things as part of this company. So I'll touch upon today a quick view of my education and career journey, more to just paint a picture of what this journey looks like, but to bear in mind that every individual will have a separate journey. And so there are infinite journeys that one could take, and there's no wrong journey, in my opinion. Uh, give an overview of what kind of careers one can expect at Google today. Talk a bit about workplaces of the future. It's a tough topic to talk about, to forecast what will happen in the future, but to kind of just share some of what I see is to come, and then leave you all with some takeaways that I hope that you will find useful and potentially put to use between now and when you graduate and also beyond that. Uh, so as Deeksha said, I have done a fair amount of studying. I did my bachelor's degree in engineering in Mumbai, and then felt that was not detailed enough or advanced enough, and then went ahead and did a master's degree in engineering as well. After working for some time, I also pursued an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration, which really opened up my eyes to the world of business, because my background was in engineering, much more technology based. From a career perspective, as an engineer, I did get my dream of working in the automotive industry. I worked in an area where we helped automotive manufacturers in the US, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler in those days, to help design their cars so that they could be more, they performed better in crashes, and to do all of this using computer-aided design. It was a new technology. This is about 25 years ago. And it was pioneering technology, and it was really fun to work on that. And what that did was it just helped these companies save time in designing and getting their cars safer for all consumers. After my business degree, I pursued I worked for some time with a leading airline in the US, United Airlines. And that's where I first learned to apply what I had learned in the areas of finance and strategy. So a very business-oriented role, completely moved away from engineering. Sticking to the travel theme, I actually joined a technology startup company in the travel sector and worked in the area of business development, which is where you help a small company or any company, in this case, or a small company, grow its business and enter into new partnerships. And that helped me join Google, where I work in a global partnerships role. And I'll talk a bit about what we do in partnerships when I talk about the various careers that one can expect in a company like Google. So as you can see from my journey, I studied in India, worked in the US, moved to India, moved to Singapore. And this all just kind of says that your career journey will actually very likely be a global journey. So I listed a few, there are many, but I listed a few common and prominent themes of careers that one can expect to find at Google. And I thought it would be probably useful to give some flavor and some examples of kind of what one could expect, what one would need to pursue in order to work in some of these careers. So let me start off with product management. So I've listed here various different products, and there are many, many more products that Google has launched, and that those are used by billions of users around the world. And what the product manager does is play the role of the CEO of a product. They are responsible for the product, its development, its performance, and its improvement. Now, product management, to work in product management, one needs to really understand users, because a product is good if its users are satisfied, if they if it does what their users want, or if it does more than what their users want. And one example of that is in Google search. When you begin typing in a search query, you see what's called the autocomplete feature. It asks you whether you were searching for, and it gives you a few different options. That didn't exist several years back, and that was a product enhancement. So something that from user studies, from research, and just from innovation, a product manager would have developed the idea, and it goes through the process to actually become a product feature. Product management is extremely iterative, which means you try things, you may succeed or you may fail, but you fail fast so that you can try it again, and you keep improving. And as most of us know, unless there are new features that are being launched, we very quickly become bored with products. So very important for a product manager, or rather very important to have a great product manager leading leading the charge. Now, product managers, there's not a specific course that one goes through. What companies generally look for are folks who probably have some basic expertise or experience or learnings in that area. So, for example, at Google, one would typically want somebody who comes from an engineering background. If you're looking at product manager for a like an aircraft manufacturing company like Boeing, they're probably looking at somebody who has an engineering background, but then they're looking for qualities that can help a product manager succeed. So moving on to the next career or role within Google, that's user experience. While the product manager develops the product, all of the graphics that you see, all of the user interfaces that you see are developed by somebody who's an expert at user experience. And what I've shown here is just a simple example. On the left side is the screen, but so screenshot on the right side is kind of where what the weather would look like is just so much more, so much better illustrated, and it's so much easier to comprehend for a user. And so user experience careers generally require one to go through a career in design. Could be visual design, graphic design, knowledge of like Photoshop and other kind of creativity tools that are commonly used to develop these kinds of experiences. But the goal of a user experience professional is to essentially amaze and delight the users with the product. Moving on next to software engineering, computer science, algorithms, logic, essentially turning the idea into a product. That's kind of what the software engineers do. And at Google and at most technology companies, they form the core of the teams and the core of the company, because they bring the most intellectual value property into the organization. So there's a lot of focus and a lot of demand and a lot of importance paid to software engineers. Again, they come from various fields, computer science as an example, but from many engineering fields and also non-engineering fields. They are looking at folks who can be creative, logical, and who can actually work in very open-ended circumstances or situations. And then we talk about computer systems and technology, hardware. The virtual world is actually built on physical infrastructure, right? And you have to have computers running behind the scenes pretty much for everything that we're doing. You lift up a phone and make a phone call, you look up something, there's information being transmitted from your phone to data centers, etc. And all those are running literally 24/7, 365 days a week. Very, very infrequently do we see systems go down. And so there's a lot of technology, a lot of learning to be done in hardware engineering, electronics engineering, knowledge of physics, etc., to work in this area. Very importantly, uh, the fact that you have a lot of these data centers and computers running also means that there is a lot of consumption of energy, and this whole issue of environmental sustainability comes up. So many companies, including Google, very proactively have been pursuing the goal to become carbon neutral. Google actually has been carbon neutral for several years, and also to become like much more independent of any energy source that will that adds carbon into the environment. So sustainability is becoming a very important thought factor when it comes to computer systems. Then I move on to business, which is kind of the area in which I am. Uh, you may or may not know that majority of Google's revenues, the earnings that Google has, does not come from Gmail and kind of the core usage of the products, or from the search engine results, but comes in from the ads that are placed. And many of you probably have noticed ads when you're watching YouTube videos, for example. But that's kind of the one way in which one can keep the internet free, because the ads help to fund that business. And there's a
Yes.
large sales. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just, I read just recently, in fact, that Google generates almost more than 70% of its revenue from advertisement itself. And that is very innovative and very creative.
Right, right. So, in fact, if you've read a book on the founding of Google, they created a great search engine. Larry and Sergey had no clue how they're going to make money. And you'll see that's probably one way of where things are going in the future, is that you just develop something, and if it's really good, you will figure out a way to make money and to make a business out of it. That's not always true, but that's generally true. Um, so there are sales teams which work with large advertisers to actually make sure that we can um, that these advertisers have all the tools that they need to advertise on Google and to actually get good returns on their spend on advertising. And there are other teams, such as the one that I work in, which is partnerships. A lot of Google search results and experiences you'll see on Google have partnerships behind the scenes. So here I've shown an example of the weather that you might search for and see in your Google search result. And that's through a partnership with weather.com. And somebody in our team has actually done that partnership. So there's thousands and thousands of partnerships that we enter into. And there are other roles in business in Google Cloud, for example, that I'll not touch upon right now. And then there's many other areas within Google. There's legal, finance, human resources. Most technology companies today, the biggest asset they have are the people. These people are being sought after by many different companies. And so it's very important for human resources or a people operations team to be very active, to be very scientific, to be very prepared to make sure that they keep having a good pipeline of candidates who can be interviewed and hired into the company. So hopefully this gives a flavor of the various different kinds of careers. Again, this is just a few key areas that I talked about. And let me tell you that not a lot of lawyers necessarily work in legal, because they worked in law and they may move to business. Or you might find somebody who's worked as a software engineer, moved to finance. And so the career path can take you in many different directions. Now I'll talk a bit about kind of the workplaces of the future. And I'll actually start with what I've seen in the most recent years in firms, in companies. And I think we're already beginning to kind of see kind of what which aspects of what we are seeing in companies in the recent years will actually stay as um, key aspects of how work will be in the future. So I've shown a couple of pictures here of workplaces, and these are all photographs from Google. But it's, the focus on, inspiring workplaces, not the regular cubicles that, were there, were the mainstay until maybe 10 years ago. Having large campuses, but having Google bikes that you can pick up from anywhere and drop off anywhere within the campus, so that you remain connected with your colleagues, but at the same time, you're not just doing everything over video calls. These are all kind of uh, ways to kind of inspire the key characteristics that I put on here, which is one is around collaboration. Now, collaboration, and you may hear this, and you probably experience this in your schools as well, in your classes as well. But bottom line is, whenever you do a group project, the whole idea is that you're collaborating, because the sum of each of your efforts as an individual, the sum of it will actually be greater than what you could have done individually. So I think that is kind of collaboration where you actually provide more value by working together. The second aspect that's going to be very important in workplace of the future is innovation. The pace of innovation we are seeing in the last year is just amazing. The rate at which new products, new designs, new ideas are coming, are not just being thought about, but are actually being produced, and they are being brought to market, is just simply amazing. And many a times you'll hear the word disruptive innovation. Disruptive meaning that whatever was the norm until then completely gets disrupted, because this innovative idea is so amazing that old model kind of goes away. And so these are things that will become, again, very important in workplaces of the future. Diversity. Uh, the world is diverse. As we said, we are all living in a global world. The world is diverse. And diverse people, diverse communities may have different needs. And therefore, if you're building any product or building any service, those would need to be diverse as well, which means I would need to have an employee base which is very diverse, so which can actually build and deliver those things. And so this is becoming extremely important. We know there have been lots of challenges on diversity. We keep hearing about how there is discrimination, etc. But I think in the workplaces of the future, there will be no tolerance for lack of diversity. And then what's become a more a recent trend is remote teams. So I would say remote teams have been, at least at Google, have been a thing for the longest time. Never have any of my colleagues been in my same office here in Singapore. For my immediate team of 20, we are all in different offices. But it's becoming more and more commonplace now, and it will become more and more commonplace in the future. I would not need to hire somebody in my location, because that is really, in many cases, not a absolute requirement given virtual working, etc. The other aspect, the software side of it, if you may, the softer qualities of it, of workplaces for the future, will focus around wellness, will focus around learning and actually giving back, contributing, doing good things for society. And a lot of you may have heard of the term, CSR, corporate social responsibility. That will become more important, and even consumers, like if I'm buying a product from company X, I might have an opinion as to whether that company is socially responsible or not, and I might make a decision based on that. Um, but again, some photographs here of examples from Google. Some of you may have heard of kind of the micro kitchens at Google, that culture, which I found extremely interesting when I first joined Google, is that you're never 100 steps away from access to snacks and food and drinks, generally healthy stuff. And they do a lot of engineering there as well. So if you have the waters and the juices and the cokes are placed in the bottom. They are placed behind this kind of the opaque glass, and they just want to make sure that you make healthier choices. But if you really want to have the Coke, it is there, right? So they put a lot of thinking into how they help employees be provided for, but also wellness being taken for. And then this example I always find pretty funny is the treadmill walking desks, which I can't walk and work at the same time. Finally, my point on the workplaces of the future is that the careers in the future will rely on higher cognitive skills, which will mean that they will involve you to be more creative, to do more critical thinking, adding numbers, doing complex math. Even your mobile phone can do that. But how do you take that number and make a decision on whether you should do A or B, decision making? That's kind of where uh, those skills will become pretty important in the future. Um, and then technology. Whether we like it or not, technology will play a role. It's up to us to be uh, uh, to kind of see how we consume technology. But I think technology will enable us to do more things more quickly in the future. Um, I will now close by talking about a few takeaways that I had, and I have some examples for those. The first takeaway I'll have for all of you as students is to just think about the 1% principle, right? This is simple math kind of, which says that if the number 1 grows at 1%, so 1.01 for 365 days, that adds up to 37.8. Bottom line, it becomes a large number. And if it decreases by 1% each day, it goes down to a very small number. The basic takeaway here is if you take little steps, you make small improvements, but you do it consistently, that can make a big difference. And what we always fall into the trap of is, yeah, that's okay. Exams are 2 months later. I'll just put in all my effort, 2 days before the exam. Doesn't work. Just put in small levels of effort consistently. That is key to success. And then essentially, to do that, you have to plan, you have to practice, and you have to strive to improve. Learning 2 new words each day can grow your vocabulary rather than saying, okay, the end of every month, on the last day of the month, I'm going to learn 20 words. Doesn't work. The second takeaway is on success is failing to fail. So this was a saying I read in some book, kind of saying, what is success? It is just failing to fail. You didn't fail. That is success. And I found this quote from Thomas Edison saying, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just figured out 10,000 ways that something will not work. Right? Look at things on the positive side. Failure is inevitable, but failure once you've tried, failure for lack of trying is not excusable, but failure after you've tried is fine because you learn a lot from failure. And in fact, when we are hiring engineers, product managers, or anyone in, somebody who gives an example of a failure that they had and how they figured out and how they improved or how they realized what they did wrong, that's actually seen as very valuable experience. So something for you to bear in mind, not to be afraid of failure, but put your best efforts towards that. And also remember, look back at your own life and you'll see that you've had more successes than failures, right? Many of you have learned to ride a bike. Many of you have learned a language. Those are all successes. We typically count our failures. We don't count our successes. So be more pragmatic about that. The third one is about consume and create. So we are all consuming a lot of information. We're consuming um, various things. So here are examples, right? Hey, we can eat good stuff, we can play games, we can listen to music. That's consume. Fine, great. That's how you develop interests. That's how you develop hobbies. But also to see if you can create. Can you actually learn and cook a healthy meal? Can you do some coding and write some games? Can you learn and make your own music? No, we need not only to consume but also create. Just as when you're learning a new concepts, the goal is not just to learn but also to apply it and actually create new concepts, create new inventions, create new discoveries. And the last one that I want to talk about is that everything counts. I know Diksha, when she was talking about, folks who are uh, thinking about academics, thinking about sports, and within academics, you have different subjects. And the takeaway that I have after so many years of education and working is that everything that you learn, everything you come across, all the advice you get, everything counts. An example I wanted to give is about art. What's the link between art and a company like Google, which is in the search arena? And the story here is that there were a couple of Googlers who had background in art and had passion in art. And as part of what's called a 20% project, 1 out of 5 days, Googlers are allowed to pursue projects that they are really interested in. They kind of said, why not actually bring art to the masses? Why not bring high quality digital images of art from around the world to users? And that's how this Google Arts and Culture product was actually formed. And you can actually, this is a photograph or a painting from National Gallery Singapore, but many museums around the world and art museums, architecture can be found on this particular product within Google. So again, remember, everything counts. Languages, everything that you learn helps you as you make your way down your career. So again, the 1% principle: don't be afraid to fail. Don't just consume, but create and make. And remember, everything counts. So those are my key takeaways for you. And I wish you all very good luck on your journey and your careers ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Venkat. That was a wonderful and insightful presentation. It was an eye-opener for me, as I'm sure it was for many of us in the audience. And I completely agree with you. I'm in harmony with what you said, that people are the most important asset, because after all intangible assets are created by us humans. And I am especially hopeful for women and mothers in the workspace with your statement that diversity is the way forward and discrimination will not be tolerated. And what I also found interesting was your observation that not all lawyers practice law. That is, I bet many of us are aspiring to be lawyers, and this will definitely catch your attention to that. Yeah. I have one question. You have studied mechanical engineering, but you finished your MBA in finance, and then when you went on to work with technology startups, how was that possible? Did your degrees in 3 different fields help you, or were they a hindrance in some way?
In general, in the earlier stages of one's career, the academic background is more, weighs a bit more, because that's kind of what your background is. But then as you begin gaining experience, it doesn't really matter what your core academic background was. Your work experience begins to take more it begins getting more weightage when folks are looking at your background, which is kind of also the reason why, you know, someone could have studied law, they could have practiced law for some period of time, but not too keen to continue with that. But they have gained so much of business, technology, and other experiences. They are very well fit to move on to other roles as well.
It's actually, yes, you're right. It is very advantageous to have different knowledge in many domains in the workplace aspect. But do you think that employers would also consider that when they would be looking at a particular person who's got a myriad of degrees or like different educational paths as well?
Your question is, do employers prefer that, or I wasn't exactly sure what your question.
Yes, like would the employers consider that the degrees in different fields would help in any way? Would they think that it's a disadvantage to their company?
I think employers are looking even from a diversity perspective. They're looking at folks with diverse backgrounds. So one of my colleagues who works in the partnerships field has a PhD in music, right? What does that have to do with partnerships? But what she brings to the table is structured thinking, is creativity, is empathy. And those are becoming skills that are becoming more important, because if I can show empathy, is it better to show empathy to enter into a partnership, or is it better to be a strictly strong negotiator to enter into a partnership? Sometimes being a very strict negotiator does not come across very well and may not help the partnership. So yeah, multiple considerations on that front.
And before we continue, I would like to encourage our audience to post their questions in the question and answer section of the Zoom chat if you have any. Like you said, we consume knowledge at every stage of our lives, and in small or big ways. All forms of knowledge are precious. Because, like you also mentioned, that it provides us with this diverse outlook, this diverse perspective, and it enables us to incorporate it into our day-to-day regimes. But what is your one advice that you would give if you were to ask what is the best degree to have in the new world of digital economies?
I really don't think there is such a thing. I would say that everyone who's pursuing whatever they are interested in, just be cognizant of the fact that there might be other complementary and supplementary areas that you should be that you should think of and pursue as well. So, for example, if somebody is pursuing, let's say, the area of marketing in the field of business, you it's important that you also understand, maybe as a complement, the area of finance, because when you're marketing a product, that's one thing, but you also need to kind of understand whether kind of the costs and the revenues and kind of the business aspect of doing marketing as well. So but marketing and finance are not just two specific fields. There can be so many different ways that things can complement can complement each other. So but my one point I would like to make is that it's becoming important for everyone to acknowledge and everyone to be up to date to the extent they can on technology, because technology is going to become a great enabler to the productivity that every employee, every innovator will have in the future. And I think that is very important for everyone to bear in mind. If you say that I'm not going to use technology, all I'm going to do is use post-it notes, and I'm kind of saying that figuratively, it's just not going to work, right? Because you will not be able to be productive. But that doesn't mean that you can't pursue something in creative in the creative arts, right? You can become a painter, you can pursue something in dance or music, because those are core needs for the human, for humans. That's kind of when I think about leisure, or okay, I need to take a break. I'm thinking about listening to music, or or eating something nice, or reading a good book, right? And so those creative arts and creative forms will definitely continue as well. So again, there's no I would not say there's any perfect
Best.
field to go ahead, but very important to actually acknowledge that technology will play a big role in the future.
The school has given us multiple platforms to explore our talent outside of just academic realms. And like you said, creativity and critical thinking will be important in our careers of the future. And also, you mentioned empathy, so our soft skills, very imperative. So, does
Mhm.
that mean that scoring grades should not be the only focus for us students? Because many of us feel that if we're not good at academics and score not just perfect, but well in school, will we be good enough for universities and eventually the job market? And how much of this is actually true?
The issue that there are a lot of aspirants for a university application or a job, and there's limited openings, always creates competition. Uh, but I find that increasingly evaluation of a person as a candidate for admission to a university or to be hired has become much broader. Earlier on, it used to be much more objective. Grades, what your previous ratings have been, etc. Right? Much more objective. It's now become much more subjective. It's become much more dependent on kind of the interview that you have. Now, it's possible that at step one on your first job or your first entry into the university, maybe the scores in your exam play a more important role. But 5 years into your career, nobody's looking at the scores into your exam, right? And so it's not, one should not think that that's going to be a permanent disadvantage. It in no way is a permanent disadvantage.
I mean, year one, JC1, 11th grade, and no one's looking back at my sixth grade score. So
Yeah.
we should not, we should take it. We should enjoy the journey.
Yes, maybe I'll just ask a few questions. So first of all, thank you so much, Mr. Venkat. I think it was a very, very insightful presentation, and the tips, the takeaways you shared was very, very valuable. Like the 1% principle that, even the small steps which you're taking consistently, that matters. All the your success, I mean, you should be counting your success, not just failures, and not just consume and create as well. I mean, they were so valuable tips for our students. There are few questions in my mind too. Uh, as you said that it's I mean, and I can also since I'm also helping out students in university applications, and I've seen that universities are giving a lot of importance to students having some kind of experience or having some internship, or at this stage,
Mhm.
when at our times we never thought that a grade 11 or 12 student can go for internships. I mean, that was a very far-fetched thing, but nowadays, like,
Mhm.
grade 11 and 12 students are are having startups, they are having ideas, business ideas, and they are having internships. So I just wanted to know from you that at Google, are there any such kind of opportunities for students at this level, like grade, say 11 and 12 students? Do you think, are there any such kind of opportunities where students can get some kind of experience, just to as a kind of during their summer, or vacation?
Mhm.
Any such kind of thing is possible?
Uh, so Google and many companies do have programs, but they generally tend to focus on college-going students, typically uh, in the third year of college, and it's done, at least in Google, that's done given the fact that publicly listed company, that there are data sensitivities, etc. So you need a certain level of maturity as well as formality, that is stage in your education to join in. But definitely, I think smaller companies are generally much more open to kind of working with interns. But yeah, that's one thing I found, and it's something to kind of think about as to how we can change that. But larger companies tend to be a bit stricter on that front. Again, there are liabilities and legal issues as well, due to which they tend not to work, especially with high school age children. Yeah, students.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Diksha, you can continue. Yeah, thanks.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. I'll take an audience question now. It seems we have a question from Miss Pratima Sadekar. She says, and I quote, Mr. Venkat, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I particularly like the consume and create concept. You mentioned that creativity is of utmost importance in future workplaces. How can one improve creativity? And not everyone has a creative mind. Please share your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, so we sometimes think of creativity as inventing something new, or creating a work of art, or being able to just put together, take apart and put something together, but that's kind of not necessarily what I had in mind with creativity. But in my mind, when I said creativity, I was just kind of saying, just do things, just get things done, right? If you you might like to, like, let's say I love, can you take photographs? Can you actually explore that as an area, right? Many a times we click a lot of photographs, but you might never know that, actually, let me take a walk around Singapore one morning and actually take pictures of some nice buildings in the downtown area, or wherever that I go. That might unlock creativity. So many a times we may not know what our kind of what we might be good at. So that's the whole idea, is try it out, and you will know when you share your work with others. You'll find out, based on their feedback, that they like it, and then okay, great, so maybe I'm good at this, let me try some more, right? A lot of people say, hey, I can't do this, I've never cooked, I can't, right? And a lot of us in the pandemic, a lot of us adults actually ended up becoming pretty good with cooking meals, right? And cooking is is as creative as it gets. So that's kind of what I meant by creative. I think we all are creative in different ways, and it's just us exploring it and doing it.
Definitely. It's the one step that we have to be brave for, that just 20 seconds of that mindset to take that step. And then I guess creativity will find us. Another question from the audience, Mr. Anup Valsan asks, do you foresee core engineering fields such as mechanical engineering or civil engineering losing its prominence to something like AI or MI, etc., for the next generation?
Absolutely not, right? One of the I told earlier that this whole virtual world, internet, e-commerce, etc., it's all built on physical infrastructure, right? And in that example, I was talking about hardware, computers. But then the real world, I can order a food delivery from Grab. It needs to be brought to me. Today, it's being brought on a vehicle. Tomorrow, the innovation may be that it comes through some kind of a robotic auto-guided vehicle, which is actually mechanical engineering. Maybe you need to have special lanes on the roads to guide that automated vehicle to come in. That's civil engineering. So I think they're all interspersed. And unless we kind of our lives are in a computer, we don't need to eat, drink, or go out. We will need all these different fields. These different fields will actually leverage AI, machine learning, etc. But it's not that they become any less important. Like look at Tesla as an example, right? Tesla innovated and disrupted the car manufacturing business, but they also encouraged all the other car manufacturers to begin building electric vehicles. So that's kind of what Tesla's new technology did to the industry. It took an old industry and made it innovate, and has brought it to the next stage of development.
We seem to be running a little short of time, so this will be my last question. Each one of us has a previously imagined trajectory to follow, which is followed by parental and teacher expectation that they have from us, and also that comes from societal expectations as we grow up and we get to know the real world a bit. And somewhere in this milia, there's a small voice that tells us to live up to our own expectations as well. And what is your observation in this matter? And what would your advice to us be? And like, how do we balance all of these weights that come to us in all directions and bombard us?
So the two things I've seen in this regard is that there are some who are extremely risk-seeking in a way, and who are extremely are willing to go the extra mile, who will do what they want to do. And again, they could succeed, they could fail, but as I said, if they fail, that's fine. You can try something else, and it's very accepted in this current. Now, if I fail on a business 2 years, for 3 years, your career is going to be 35, 40, 50 years long, right? It doesn't make a dent there. It actually makes you stronger. On the flip side, there are many situations where folks might go with the more, let me call it, conservative approach, kind of saying, no, let me just go down this route. You might end up liking it, but many a times if you don't, and I find often people don't, then they pivot at a later stage, right? And they kind of go towards kind of what their initial aspiration was. I think it is very important to think about and to prepare and to create those dreams, to actually discuss that with your peers, your friends, other students in your class. I find that's something that students and kids don't do enough of these days, is to kind of discuss these things amongst themselves, because I think that is extremely important to share with each other, and it inspires you. You might have some ideas in your mind that actually inspire your friend who may otherwise have not thought about it, and can actually influence their career. So I think it's very important that you do that. I think there's no right answer, really.
Right.
It all depends on the level of risk one is willing to take. And some people deal with failure better, others don't. And again, it's very important for the family, for teachers, and the peers to actually help each other when that happens.
Sure, they are our core moral support out there, our pillar. This was one of the most wonderful webinars that I have attended, and a great heart-to-heart talk with you, Mr. Venkat, a parent on my career. And I'm sure many of you, our audience members, have taken a lot from this chat and will implement these learnings in your life. I want to thank Mr. Venkat for taking the time to help and guide students in this journey towards adulthood and navigating our journey through the innumerable career paths and opportunities that we will be facing. Thank you to the teachers and coordinators who helped to conduct this webinar. We will hold more of such webinars in future with many more parents who will have numerous stories to share and successes to talk about in different fields. Stay tuned for our email on my GIIS. And until next time, this is Diksha Kapoor signing off. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.